Welcome. In this video, I will go over the different ways of integrating OPC, UA, and DA items into your Blue Open Studio project. First, for a reference, we will use a Blue runtime sharing its variables as an OPC UA server. The variables included in this runtime project include nested classes or structures and multi-dimension arrays, so we can observe how the different methods in Blue Open Studio realize different levels of support for these types of items. The first method we will use will be utilizing the import wizard. In the case of the import wizard, the OPC support is limited to working with OPC DA. So in this case, we will be using the Schneider Electric OFS OPC DA server for this case. So to use the import wizard, we go to the Home ribbon, Import Wizard. We select OPC Server Database. We select Next. We're going to just connect to a local server, and we're going to pick the Schneider OFS server that we identify in the drop-down list. Of course, in your case, it will be whatever OPCDA server you're using locally. Click Next, and then you'll see that the client will go out, communicate with the server, and bring back all the variables. Now, in this dialog, you can choose whether to include or not include the items in your Blue Open Studio project. So we'll just leave it at default to what it brought in, and we'll hit finish. Okay, click finish here. Okay, and then what you will notice if you go to the Communications tab in the main Project Explorer and we go in under OPCDA, we will see that we have a worksheet, an OPC worksheet created by the import wizard, fully populated with a tag name usable in Blue Open Studio, and then the tag names are tied to their corresponding OPC DA objects. Okay, now we will switch gears and look into OPC UA. Remember, for OPC UA, we were using a Blue runtime to act as an OPC UA server in order to use Blue Open Studio to browse the elements in this OPC UA server to illustrate the different ways that we can bring in the variables. So in the Blue project, what you'll notice is I've created some user data types. I've created basically three types. I've created a motor type, very simple. I've created a heater type, very simple. And then I created a pool type. And in that pool type, basically what I did is that I embedded the motor and the heater structures within the pool data type. I also created some arrays that look like this. I created a 4-dimension array called entry counter. I just created one single dimension array with 100 elements just to see it. And then I created a pools array, which is using the pool data type. So then we go back into the variable list. You can see how this now appears in here. Here's my different pools with their nested classes. And you can see down here, here's my pools array. For OPC UA, the first method we will explore is tag integration. When you use tag integration with OPC in Blue Open Studio, you must first set up a connection to the OPC server in the Communications tab. So switching to Blue Open Studio in the Communications tab, we will expand the OPC UA folder. We will highlight connections and right-click and insert a connection. Here, we're going to give it a name. Any name is fine. We'll just keep it simple and call it OPC underscore client. And then in the endpoint, in this case, we're just going to, because the OPC UA server is a Blue runtime on our same PC, we're just going to keep it simple and use the famous opc.tcp URL : / the loopback address, and then very important, : and and then the port number that OPC UA uses by default, and this is also the port number that is set within the Blue runtime. If that is all set up correctly and your OPC server is ready, you can test the connection, and then if all is well, you'll get a message saying that you've established a successful connection to the OPC server from the OPC client. Click OK, click OK. Now that we have the OPC client created, now we're going to create the tag integration. To create tag integration, we're under the project ribbon in the communication tab. In the tag integration section, we're going to add a tag integration. You'll find an OPC UA selection in the tag integration. As with all tag integrations, we can have a prefix for the tag name that the tag integration will create. We'll just leave it default. And then we add the tag integration. You'll see it pre-selected the server that we've created because this is the only one. You can see this is the only OPC UA. If there was other OPC UA clients configured, you would obviously have more in the list. We'll click OK. And then at that point, that's all we need to do in this particular dialog. Now, what has happened is behind the scenes, Blue Open Studio has created basically a hidden driver worksheet that we can access via screen objects or functionalities. So to illustrate that, we'll come in here, we'll create a screen, we will put a text box object on the screen, and we're doing this in order so we can browse the OPC UA server. So now what we'll do is we'll go to the tags, and now what you'll see is in this tag dialog, you will now see the device, which is the OPC client connecting to the Blue Runtime OPC server. And then in this dialog, basically now it's to be patient because now what's happening is behind the scenes, the client is communicating to the server in reaching out and getting the tag. So basically the way that this dialog is working is when you click on different things to refresh the page, it can sometimes open up and expose other items that are in the OPC server that you're browsing. And what you'll notice here is the way that this is working is this is accessing all the nested classes, but it's flattening out the entire structure. Okay. And you can see, we'll just go back here. You can see here's the single dimension array. That comes in just fine. Here's the pools. Here's the 15 deep array of pools. And again, you'll notice as you click back and forth, you make this object finder drill into different things and then ultimately expose the flattened out variable. And then you pick it like this, okay, and then basically that big long string ends up in your object, and that's where the data comes from. The last method we will speak about is using OPC UA driver worksheets. And what we're doing here is we're basically essentially creating driver worksheets instead of using tag integration. So to do that, we're going to go to the OPC UA section in the COM tab. We'll right click, hit insert. So now we've added an OPC UA worksheet. We'll give it a description. We could say client via worksheet. Okay. We'll use the same existing OPC client connection that we've already created. And then we'll notice because we are using a worksheet, we now have access to different things where we can add variables to monitor status, get the publish rate, actually disable the sheet, etc. So now what happens is once I've got this created and I've told it that I'm connecting via this OPC client, now what happens is when I double click in the browse path, now what you'll see, expand that back up, is what you'll see is you'll actually see a little bit nicer view of what the OPC server looks like. So now you can actually see, like for example, if I go into the pools area where I've got nested classes and an array, you could see how everything is presented in a little bit nicely, a better organized way, more matching how everything is nested inside the actual OPC UA server. And then you basically have to pick that path. Okay. Using that browse method, essentially what you've done is you've pre-created the valid path so that the OPC client can get at the data in the OPC UA server. And then you have to also use a corresponding tag, which you can create here, for example. So in conclusion, what we can say when we're talking about integrating OPC UA into your Blue Open Studio project, there are basically two methods that get you to the same place. The one method using the OPC UA worksheet allows you to view the structures and the nested classes in a more native way, whereas the whereas the tag integration allows you to browse the different variables via the different objects in our standard way using the tag integration method. Thank you for watching.